Avoiding Oregon Landlord Retaliation. Lessons from a $32,000 Multnomah County verdict. Hey there, fellow Oregon landlords. If you caught the Oregonian story that dropped this morning, you already know a Multnomah County jury just handed down a $32,000 verdict with a request for roughly $225,000 in attorney fees still pending after finding that a rent increase violated Oregon's anti-retaliation statute. The whole thing started over a $287 electrician's bill. I'm not here to second-guess the owner or the company. The public filings show they maintained the increase was a normal market adjustment, the first in 18 months, and that comparable units were already renting higher. They're appealing. What I am here to do is treat the publicly reported facts and the court record as a live case study so the rest of us can tighten our processes before summer turnover turns into an expensive lesson. Oregon law gives tenants strong remedies when a jury decides a rent increase came after a good faith complaint. The difference between a routine business decision and six-figure exposure is almost always documentation, timing, and consistency. Let's walk through what the record shows and the practical steps that keep you on the right side of both. In late 2023, a couple moved into a South Portland unit near Willamette Park at $1,695 a month. Over the next year, they raised ordinary issues. Then, around Christmas 2024, the tenant reported smoke, a spark, and a sizzling sound from an electrical outlet. An electrician hired by the landlord replaced the socket. The landlord billed the tenants $287, taking the position the damage was tenant-caused. According to the court filings, the tenant sent a written dispute on March 10, 2025, and followed up with a second letter on March 20, 2025, this time mailed to the owner's home address. In that second letter, the tenant acknowledged it had initially been reasonable to pass the bill along, but after learning the technician's position, an alarm clock had been plugged in, and noting the lease's hourly rate cap, they formally refused to pay and asked for a written response. 4 days later, on March 24, 2025, the landlord issued a $100 monthly rent increase to $1,795. A neighbor in a comparable unit did not receive the same increase. The tenants later moved out. A Multnomah County jury found the rent increase violated ORS 90.385, answered yes on the retaliation claim, and awarded $16,000 in non-economic damages. Oregon law doubles that amount to $32,000. Tenants' counsel is seeking attorney fees currently reported around $225,000. Those are the publicly reported and court record facts. Everything that follows treats them strictly as a teaching sequence. Oregon's anti-retaliation statute is straightforward once you strip away the legalese. Under ORS 90.385, a landlord may not increase rent, decrease services, serve a termination notice, or bring or threaten a possession action after a tenant has made a good faith complaint related to the tenancy or has asserted tenant rights. Protected activity includes complaints to the landlord about conditions or billing under the lease. If a landlord violates the statute, the tenant is entitled to the remedies in ORS 90.375 year, up to 2 months' rent or twice actual damages, whichever is greater, plus a defense to any retaliatory possession action. In practice, that has produced double damages and fee shifting. The Oregon Supreme Court has made the causation standard relatively low. The tenant only needs to show the protected activity was a factor that made a difference in the landlord's decision. That's the Elk Creek management case from 2013. Limited statutory exceptions exist: tenant default in rent, complaint made in an unreasonably harassing manner, or a code violation primarily caused by the tenant. But none of those were found to apply here. What the reported sequence and court exhibits illustrate, without any speculation about anyone's private motives, is a set of process gaps that increased exposure. Billing a tenant for a repair without contemporaneous written evidence, clearly establishing tenant causation, creates an immediate dispute file. Implementing a rent increase only 4 days after the tenant's second written protest invites the jury to connect the two events. Applying the increase to one unit while a comparable neighboring unit did not receive the same increase supplies evidence of disparate treatment. Continuing to send past due notices on a disputed charge after formal written protest keeps the conflict alive. Each of those steps taken alone might be defensible. Taken together under Oregon statute, they handed the jury a clear timeline. Here's the lower-risk alternative playbook we recommend at Northwest Real Estate and Property Management and teach in PAROA classes. Repair billing protocol. Require a written work order, photos before and after, and a clear statement from the contractor on probable cause before any charge is assessed to the tenant. If the cause is ambiguous, Absorb the cost or document why you are treating it as ordinary maintenance. Sample language for the charge letter. Per the attached invoice and technician notes dated, the damage to the outlet appears to have been caused by. Photographs of the condition are enclosed. Please remit $287 within 30 days. If you dispute this charge, provide your written explanation and any supporting evidence within 14 days so we can review. If the technician cannot or will not assign clear causation, do not bill the tenant. Clear contractor notes and before and after photos are the first line of defense when assessing repair responsibility. Always respond to tenant complaints or disputes in writing, acknowledge receipt, and keep a chronological file. Silence after a formal protest letter is not neutral. And now a couple shameless plugs. Owners with properties in the Portland Metro or Central Oregon who want the operational burden lifted, especially eviction processing or full management, can hand the file to Northwest Real Estate and Property Management. We live inside these statutes every day, maintain the documentation systems that survive scrutiny, and handle the timing questions so you don't have to second-guess every rent increase during peak season. Visit www.nwrpm.com if you'd rather spend your time on acquisitions than on deposition preparation. If you're staring at a disputed repair bill or a rent increase timeline that feels a little too close to a recent written protest, the PAROA helpline and our education sessions exist exactly for these moments. Members get attorney-vetted landlord forms, real-time guidance, and classes that walk through the exact documentation sequences that keep cases out of Multnomah County courtrooms. Join at www.paroa.org, especially useful when summer turnover has everyone moving fast, and documentation sometimes gets skipped. Back to the playbook. Rent increase timing and documentation. Maintain a written, portfolio-wide increase policy. When an increase is planned after a recent complaint, document independent market data, the last increase date for that unit, and the pure business reason. Consider a short cooling-off period or a second set of eyes if the complaint is still active. A 4-day gap between a written protest and a rent increase notice is exactly the kind of timing that juries notice. Consistency across units. Apply increases according to a documented schedule or criteria so that similar units are treated similarly. When to pause. If a tenant has made a recent good faith complaint about conditions or has disputed a charge in writing, treat any proposed rent increase or other adverse action as high risk and obtain a second review. That pause is cheaper than a verdict. Insurance and documentation habits. Photograph and timestamp everything. Retain contractor invoices and notes. Consider notifying your carrier early if a dispute escalates. Portland and Multnomah County add an extra layer. Local juries and the concentration of tenant-side counsel mean process discipline is not optional. Overlay the statewide 9.5% rent stabilization maximum for 2026 and Portland's relocation assistance triggers, and a poorly timed increase can trigger multiple statutes at once. The good news is that lawful rent increases and legitimate repair allocations remain fully available. The statute does not freeze rents after every complaint. It simply requires that the business decision stand on its own documented feet. A written portfolio-wide increase policy and a short pause after written protests keep ordinary business decisions from looking retaliatory. Here's a quick red flag checklist you can print and keep at your desk. Has the tenant made a written complaint or formal dispute in the last 60 to 90 days? Do I have contemporaneous contractor notes and photos establishing clear tenant causation for any charge? Is this rent increase being applied consistently to comparable units under a written policy? Can I produce independent market data and the unit's last increase date today if asked? Have I paused long enough for a second review if any of the above answers raise concern, especially if the gap is measured in days rather than weeks? If any answer is no or I'm not sure, slow down. The cost of a pause is measured in days. The cost of a verdict is measured in tens or hundreds of thousands. Lawful rent increases and legitimate repair billing are still core tools of the business. The difference between a routine decision and a six-figure exposure is almost always the paper trail, the calendar, and consistent treatment across the portfolio. Take an hour this month to audit your current repair billing and rent increase procedures. Pull the last 3 disputed charges and the last 3 increases that followed tenant complaints. If the documentation is thin or the timing is tight, especially if it's measured in single-digit days, fix the process now while it's still cheap. Stay sharp out there. The summer turnover season is already in full swing, and the next jury is only one poorly documented $287 bill and a 4-day gap away. What are some of the tightest retaliation timing situations you've navigated as a Portland area landlord? Drop them in the comments. I read everyone. Hey, if you're a Portland area landlord, come join the community over at www.paroa.org. We've got education, forums, networking, and we fight for your rights at the legislature. And for owners in the Portland Metro or Central Oregon looking for hassle-free management, check out the pros at www.nwrpm.com. Join paroa.org today, like, subscribe, and comment.